Well, good afternoon, everyone. So here we are joined for the seminar on the overview of the LSST Dark Energy Science Collaboration. And we have the great pleasure of having Katrin Heitmann, Renee Hlozek, Kate Bechtol, and James Chiang. These four people are top in the LST collaboration, and we are very happy and proud to have you here indeed. Katrin Heitmann was elected DESC collaboration spokesperson very recently this year. And she's a physicist and computational scientist at Argonne National Laboratory at the High Energy Physics Division. He's also a member of the Cabell Institute and the University of Chicago. Renee Hlozek is a professor of astronomy and astrophysics at Dunlap Institute of Astronomy and the University of Toronto. She studies the CMB, supernovae, baryon acoustic oscillation, so very interesting issues. Kate Bechtol is a professor at the Department of Physics in the University of Wisconsin, and he's one of the leads of the Rubin Observatory commissioning and science validation on data analysis and sky observations. And his principal work is on the Magellanic Satellite Survey with the CAM. And Jim Chiang is a software developer at SLAC, and he has been working on Fermi Gamma Ray Space Telescope and works as a coordinator of the LSST computing and simulation. So, well, thank you very much, and you're welcome.
Thanks a lot for the very nice introduction. Thanks for having us, giving us the opportunity to talk to you all about LSST DESC. As you just heard, we will give the presentation with four people. So we have myself, Keith, who is currently the Deputy Technical Coordinator, Renee, who is the Deputy Spokesperson, and Jim as a Computing and Simulation Coordinator. And these positions will make a little bit more sense while we are going through the talk. We tell you a little bit about the structures in DESC and how we all work together. And so we broke up the talk into four pieces. So Keith will start us off with giving us an overview about the Vera Rubin Observatory and the Legacy Survey of Space and Time, LSST. I will then talk a little bit about LSST DESC, the setup, how we work all together. And then Jim will talk about computing, and Renee will give you an overview of the LSST DESC science program. And as we said, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt. It's always nice to have an interactive discussion. And I'll hand it over to Keith, who will start with the Rubin Observatory.
Thanks, Katrin, and thanks for having us today. So if you go to the next slide. I'll be giving a quick overview of the Rubin Observatory. As Katrin mentioned, I have a DESC hat in that I'm very much involved with the Dark Energy Science Collaboration as a scientist, but I also have a role in the project in terms of leading the commissioning, science verification, and validation effort. So I'll talk a little bit about this interface between the project and the DESC here. So to try to summarize the Rubin Observatory in one sentence, the way I like to think about it is that this is a facility that will catalog more stars, galaxies, and solar system objects in its first year of science operations with the Legacy Survey of Space and Time, LSST, than all previous astronomical telescopes combined. Right, so this is nothing short of ambitious. The picture shown here on the left panel is a small region of sky imaged with SDSS, the Sun Digital Sky Survey. So this was the groundbreaking experiment for doing cosmological surveys with optical imaging telescopes from the early 2000s, and is still going on. What you can see with an image of the same region of sky taken with the Hyper-Suprime Cam telescope and camera. This is 5 magnitudes deeper so detecting objects that are 100 times fainter in the same region of sky. And this is a preview of what LSST depth will look like, but imagine this type of richness of data over 20,000 square degrees is effectively what we will have. So in many ways, this will be a transformational experiment. For each region of sky, there will be dozens of observations every observing season, accumulating to something like close to 1,000 visits in 6 different broadband filters accumulated over 10 years. So we'll have a time domain aspect as well. If you go to the next slide, please. So this is an overview of all of the data products that will be produced from that data. So the Rubin Observatory project has a dedicated data management system that takes the raw images, will reduce them into calibrated image, and then will do both co-additions to detect the faintest possible objects, and also difference imaging to see what is changing each time you revisit the same patch of sky. So the way that these are released is in 2 main methods. One are the prompt data products. So these are the data products that are released essentially every night, including alert streams that are made available to the community brokers within 60 seconds. And this is mainly focused on time domain science, the science that you would want to do immediately based on transient and variable objects and moving objects in our solar system. The second category of data product is the data release data products. So these are produced on a roughly annual cadence. And this will eventually amount up to close to something like 40 billion objects that are detected in this full deep co-ed. The way that these will be served is through a variety of data access centers that are located around the world, as well as independent data access centers. And we expect that one of the main avenues that scientists will use to access the data is the Rubin Science Platform, which has a couple different aspects to it, and I'll talk about that more in a coming slide. If you go to the next slide, please. This is just a little bit more detail about these prompt data products and data release products. Again, just to give us a sense of scale, this alert stream is something like 10 million time domain events per night. And these are basically sent to the alert brokers within 60 seconds of doing the camera readout. And then for the data release products, again, this is an annual cadence, but I should emphasize that the data release products, in addition to doing the full processing of the COAD, they also go back and do the full time series and force photometry. So even though it's a data release product, it also has the time domain information included. Okay, so if you go on, please. So the challenge here, thinking about a cosmology perspective as we do in the desk, is that we will have an enormous, unprecedented statistical power in this data set. So what we need to overcome is being able to forward model all of the interesting cosmological physics in terms of the dark energy, dark matter, massive neutrinos, early universe, et cetera, into the observable space of LSST with exquisite accuracy so that we are not limited by systematics and can take full advantage of the statistical power of this survey. So what this requires is a very deep understanding of both the theory and the instrument. If you follow this link at the bottom, the desk science requirements documents gives some sense for the level of precision that we need. But we're talking about flux calibration at the level of 0.5% for objects all over the sky, being able to measure ellipticities at part per thousand precision. So if we go on to the next slide. One of the things that's different about the whole Rubin Observatory scientific ecosystem from many other high energy physics experiments is that there is this distinction between the Rubin Observatory project and the 8 science collaborations, of which DESC is one of them. And I think it's most effective if we really think about this as a partnership between the Rubin Observatory project and the science collaborations, that we're all working towards the same goal, and we just have sort of different roles and responsibilities within that big goal. From the standpoint of the project, and thinking about this importance of really understanding the system, I think it helps to actually look at the Rubin Observatory mission statement carefully. So if you read it, and this was chosen carefully, the Rubin Observatory's mission is to build a well-understood system that will produce an unprecedented astronomical data set for studies of the deep and dynamic universe, make this data set widely available to a diverse community of scientists, and engage the public to explore the universe. So I think this well-understood system is really key in terms of understanding where the desk fits in and where scientists take a role in understanding this data and providing an interpretation. So there's three key questions that we're asking during this commissioning and transition to early operations of Rubin Observatory. And these are questions of verification, validation, and characterization. So verification is the sort of the formal domain of the project, and this is effectively asking, have we built the telescope and the data management system, the camera, that all of these pieces are working together in a way that matches the normative requirements, basically meets the design specifications. And this is formally the responsibility of the project. Now, when you get to science validation and characterization, these are more questions about, can we use this data to accomplish our science goals? And this is something that's really a partnership between the Rubin Observatory project and the science collaborations, including the desk. And in fact, many of the individual working groups within the desk are working at this interface in terms of understanding sensor anomalies, photometric corrections, modeling of the point spread function, blending effects, and so forth. So a major aspect of the desk is really understanding these technical pixel level details and feeding that information back to the project. So if we go on, please. So here's, with that sort of big overarching framework of what we're trying to accomplish in the overall system, this is a high level view of the schedule in terms of what's happening. Maybe Jim, I don't know if you have your mouse, but there's a little gray box that says now, that's kind of in the center of the figure with a vertical dashed gray arrow. Yes, so this is where we are now at the end of calendar year 2021. So some of the key milestones here is that there's already been a data preview, which is a preliminary release of data products based on simulated desk data that is basically a demonstration of exercising the science pipelines. The telescope mount assemblies in Chile, the mirrors in Chile, the full focal plane of the camera has been integrated and is now being tested at SLAC. So we are right at a stage where all of these individual components of the Rubin Observatory system are completed or nearing completion. They're basically being delivered, and now we're at the phase of the project where these are all being integrated and tested as a single system. So what is coming up, if you look kind of a year down the road, we'll be entering this period that's called SITCOM, System Integration and Commissioning, Early and Full System Integration. This is where we put the instrument on the telescope and we begin to go on sky, doing observing, pushing data through the science pipelines, and basically doing the checkout that everything is ready to begin the LSST survey. So if you go on, please. So this is a quick overview of the commissioning on-sky observing to get a sense of what will be happening during this commissioning period. There's actually, before we put on the full LSST camera, the full 3.2 gigapixel camera, we will actually begin testing with a commissioning camera. It's basically a single raft of 9 sensors compared to the 21 science rafts that go on the full LSST camera. So it's all of the same electronics interface and instrumentation but it's basically a small scale version of the full focal plane. So we'll have an opportunity to do a lot of testing with that commissioning camera, and effectively with both the ComCam and the full LSST camera. When these first go on sky, there'll be a period of about 3 months or so to do all the electrical optical testing and all of the engineering work that you need to basically make sure that the instrument itself is functioning as expected. Once we've completed that period, the commissioning phase will conclude with about 2 months of dedicated on-sky observing. We call these the science validation surveys, and this will be our first sustained observing campaigns where we get to see the full system at work and have an opportunity to look at the data. So to give a sense of timescale for this, we're talking about mid-2023. If you go on a slide, please. So the data products from commissioning will be made available in a series of data previews for scientists in the US and Chile and international data rights holders. And the purpose of these data previews is it's partly to help the operations team itself go through the whole exercise of preparing a major data release. But importantly, it's also for the science community to get a first look at data, a first preview of what LSST data will look like, to prepare scientifically and technically, and to provide feedback to the Rubin Observatory project. So this chart is showing a timeline of when we expect these data products to be made widely available, and what types of data products are included in each of these data previews. As you can see, there's sort of an increase in complexity in the range of data products going forward in time. If you go on, please. So just to quickly talk about the Rubin Science Platform, the whole idea of this is to allow scientists to do next to the data analysis, where rather than a model where you download data to your local laptop, what you do is that you go and you work in the cloud effectively. So you could be running at one of the Rubin Observatory data access centers, and you would be, there's a couple different aspects of the science platform, but we expect that probably the main interface that professional scientists will use is this notebook aspect, where effectively you can write Python code and do visualization and sophisticated database queries all within this cloud-based online platform. So again, that's sort of the main interface that we expect users to have. And already community members are starting to exercise this with Data Preview 0, which is based on a cosmological simulation that was done by the desk. If you go on, please. Just to give a quick sense of current activity on the construction project, basically there's action on all fronts. A couple of the major milestones are that the telescope mount assembly is now inside the dome in Chile at the summit in Characachuan. And they've gone through the exercise of basically being able to rotate and swivel the telescope in altitude and azimuth. That's being shown in the lower left. In the upper left, you can see a lot of the work that's happening on level 3. The commissioning camera has now been mounted onto the camera cart assembly. So this is an opportunity to exercise the full refrigeration system that is attached to the camera, a prototype of basically the refrigeration system that will be used on the main camera. It allows us to exercise all of the data transfer and command and control interfaces. If you look on the right, this is a picture taken at SLAC of the camera that's now been integrated with the utility trunk. And in the lower right, this is an image of one of the filters of the LSST camera. Now all of the optical elements have been delivered to the project. So that happened just last month. That effectively now all of the mirrors, all of the lenses, all of the filters are now in hand, and all are meeting specs. So everything about the image quality budget seems to be on track. If you go one more slide. One thing I want to emphasize is that in some sense, the commissioning has already started. There's an auxiliary telescope it's basically adjacent to the main summit facility on the same mountaintop. It's just a few meters away. And this auxiliary telescope, you can really think about it as a pathfinder for the full system integration. It's using the same detector technology, the same communication interfaces, the same data processing pipelines. And so even though it's a much smaller system that has a dedicated purpose for monitoring the atmosphere, it's allowing the commissioning team to see how all of these different components of the system will work together. And many desk members are involved in this early commissioning effort. One more slide. So this is the last slide in my section. I just wanted to point you to a number of links with more documentation. So these are available for you. That's it for me.
Thank you, Keith. Do people have questions about Reuben status? Yes, I saw a hand, but I don't know how this.
Yes, Sebastian has a question. You want to ask now, Sebastian? Sebastian, we can't hear you.
A question about surface brightness. Yeah, it's a great question. The number that comes to mind immediately is sort of in the 30 magnitudes per square arc second, but I should double check that. That's the target regime. Is yeah, sort of in the 30 magnitudes per square arc second level. That's quite a bit fainter than most current facilities.
Okay. There are no more other questions? Oh, there is. Yes. Please speak up.
Hello, Keith.
Hello.
How we will share? No, how you will share the data, Rubin, for the science community?
How will the data be shared?
Yes.
Yes. So the primary interface that's expected is that scientists would be able to log on to the Rubin Science platform if they want to access the data directly and to be able to create visualizations and do analysis. I mean, effectively, you have an installation of the science pipeline tools, and so you'd have everything that you need to do analysis through the science platform. But in addition to that, it is possible to basically download the data that you need if you want it. And DESC has specific plans for to do processing on the scale that DESC needs to do, and I think Jim is going to talk about that in detail later.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, I have a question about the science platform. There is some channel recommended. I mean, the use of the science platform have to be preferably in using this kind of interface in Python or perhaps because or perhaps is I'm thinking about some of the things that we are thinking to do. and probably for us it's much easier for the use of NERSC cluster and log there and use the data there. So what I am asking is if there is some recommendation from you to approach the data for first time. I mean, the mock catalogs are the data. Do you think there is more documentation, or is more easy to use this science platform using Python, or there is also resources to find to use the data in the cluster directly in the data center of NERSC?
Yeah, so if you in the reference slide that I had, I put links to both the information about the notebook aspect of the science platform, but there's also a series of tutorials that have been developed by the community engagement team. In particular, a series that is based on this data preview 0 that is intended to be very accessible and a starting point for first-time users of the science pipelines. Maybe I should let Jim, though, address the part about NERSC, because I think for many desk users that has proven to be a very useful platform.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so all the data, certainly for DC2, is available at NERSC, and so this includes everything that's available through Data Preview 0, including the pixel data as well as the catalogs. And we have everything set up so that you can run, either just Python programs in the batch queues or run Jupyter notebooks similar to the ones that are available in these tutorials on those data directly at NERSC on the cluster. So, I mean, if you had access to NERSC and access to the desk data, you could investigate it that way, I think, pretty much as easily as through the RSP.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, maybe we should move on, and I promise I will be relatively fast here. So I want to give you a little bit of an overview about how the dark energy science collaboration is set up. As you can imagine, having a collaboration with a very large number of people has some challenges to manage, but it also has a lot of opportunities working with so many people together. So we have tried in the last years to really build a structure to make this collaborative work possible. So here you see something that Keith already alluded to, that we have the Rubin Observatory, but then we have the science collaborations that work closely with Rubin together, and DESC is one of 8 science collaborations. And we formed originally in 2012, and by now have more than 1,100 international members. And the very nice thing is, oh, there's a question.
Yes, Vanessa.
Mm-hmm.
Vanessa, would you like to ask now?
Okay, no problem. And the nice thing is that, so for the dark energy science collaboration for DESC, if you have data rights or you have a path to data rights, I know that a lot of Argentinian folks have proposals for getting data rights in the queue. You can become a member and really work with us. So that's really great. Go to the next slide, please. Right, and so here's just an overview over the next couple of slides, what we want to do. You have heard already from Keith, our scientific aim is to explore the physics of the dark universe, dark energy, dark matter, neutrinos, and signatures of inflation. On the right, you actually see a plot of W0, WA constraints, so how well we hope we will constrain the dark energy equation of state with year 1 data, actually, and comparison of different probes that we will use for that, clusters, strong lensing, supernovae, weak lensing, and large-scale structure probes, and also combining them. So the smallest ellipse is actually our estimate how well we will do combining all these probes, and also stage 3, where stage 3 dark energy experiments is what's ongoing now, like DES or KIDS. But I always think that this W0 WA ellipse plot is much too simplified. My background is in theory, and I think the exciting part will really that we will see how well the paradigm of the dark energy or a cosmological constant actually will hold up. And I think we will do much, much more than just generating ellipses of W0 WA. So that will be very, very exciting. Our objectives are to do accurate cosmology, no problem. Accurate cosmology, and Keith already said that there will be a lot of interesting challenges to really get the constraints to the accuracy that we want. We want to build a vibrant and inclusive scientific community, so that is very important for us. As I said, if you have more than 1,000 members, you want to make sure that we all communicate well, that everybody feels welcome, and we really work well together. We want to meet the LSST Big Data Challenge. Again, Keith alluded to that already a little bit. We want to build robust pipelines to analyze the data at scale. Here, NERSC also comes in handy, a high-performance computing center that is really going to be very helpful to deal with the large data. And we also want to learn continuously from each other. We have really made a lot of material available for new desk members. So Jim just gave this example about the Data Challenge 2, DC2. If you start as a new member in desk, there are lots of tutorials available, how you can get access to the data, how you can use the data. And we are really trying to help new desk members to onboard and to really get a good start into the collaboration. Next slide. Yeah, thanks. So this is from the days before the pandemic. So we have 2 times a year we have collaboration meetings. We have once a year we have a hack week where we all get together and really work together on projects. And as you can see, it's a big community, and getting together is one of the things that really makes the collaboration a lot of fun, and working together and really supporting each other. Next slide, please. And our approach is that we want to combine 5 complementary cosmology probes, clusters of galaxies, large-scale structures, supernova, weak lensing, and strong lensing. And again, I would like to say that this is more like the conventional approach. So I'm sure there will be, in the next decade, when we have the data, people will come up with new probes, how we can actually extract information about the dark universe from this exquisite set of data. So that will be very, very exciting. Our challenges will be systematics. I think there's no question about that. Systematics from the measurement side, systematics from the modeling and theory side. How do we take into account, for example, astrophysical effects on small scales? Because we really want to push our analysis to smaller scales to extract really new science from the data. On the right, what you see is, so how we want to do this is, right now we are preparing for the data with a combination of simulated data and precursor data. And we are currently in something that we call the science readiness phase. And on the right, you see actually a simulated image from a cluster of galaxies from the DESC Data Challenge 2, and Jim will talk to you more about this. And what we are really trying to achieve here is to have something that looks really, really close to the real data. And so we put in a lot of effort, and I think it paid off already. People can explore this data set and they know the truth. That's always very helpful. So a lot of projects on this data set are ongoing, and again, it's easy to get started on this data set because we have a lot of material to help people with that. Just go to the next slide, since we are kind of a little bit late. This is, so Keith showed you a lot of timeline plots. And this is kind of like the very, very simplified one that we use in DESC. So on the lower part, you see, again, the data previews that Keith talked about. And we have aligned our timelines with these data previews. So the data challenges, Data Challenge 2, the production has finished for a while now. So we are analyzing that. And we are aiming to, this analysis will go longer on than the end of 2021, 2022. As long as we can get science out of it, we will continue that. But then the science readiness will basically end when data preview 0 ends, which is simulated data, and then early science will begin with actual data from the Rubin Observatory. So that will be very, very exciting. And then the first data release from Rubin will be actually half a year of observations, and with the second data release, which will be the first full year of observations, we are hoping to do cosmology at the end of this graph. Next slide, please. This is just a very, I should go through this very, very quickly because we want to get to the exciting science that DESC is doing already. This is just a picture that shows you the structure that we have in DESC. So we have a collaboration council. You see some of us here, the spokesperson, deputy spokesperson, and 2 of the coordinators. And so we are basically trying to build a structure in order to help people to navigate the big collaboration. If you go to the next slide. So what you see here is the entities that you, if you become a DESC member, will be interacting with quite a bit. They're the working groups on the lower part, and you will hear more about that also from Renee. So we have split up our working groups into an analysis component, a computing and simulation component, and a technical component. And obviously all these working groups, there are 18 of them, work together, but it has proven to be very effective to have them broken up in this way so that we have leaders, the coordinators of these working groups that actually have the background to do a really good job in this. The spokesperson team, Renee and I at the moment, we are here to help everybody. You would hear a lot of messages from us. Then we have the Speakers Bureau and the Publication Board, and if you're a DESC member, you will hear a lot from them as well. So DESC members, they suggest projects. Everybody can join a suggested projects. Papers and talks are not organized, are shepherded through by the Publications Board and the Speakers Bureau, so they will help you there. And then we also have entities like the ombudspeople. If something really goes wrong, they are there to help with conflicts that might turn up. So there's a lot of people you can talk to in this structure. And if you go to the next slide, this is the last piece here. We have an EDI committee, an Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion committee. Actually, Keith is on that, who is on this talk. And they proactively try to really help improve questions about equity, diversion, and inclusion in DESC, give us option to discuss possible problems, option to provide information how we can improve in DESC overall. And we have an operations team that actually helps us build some of the infrastructure. Next slide, please. And these are now the DESC working groups. So you can see we have 18 working groups, and they are, as I said before, organized around analysis, computing, and technical working groups. And again, if you join DESC or you have joined DESC already, some of you might have joined already with the Path to Data Rights part. You can join these working groups. They are regular telecons, and it's really where the work is getting done. Next slide. And this one is just becoming a DESC member is, as I said, relatively straightforward. We have 1,100 members so far. If you commit and have shown a lot of work, a lot meaning like I think it is a year of work, you can apply for full membership that provides you voting rights. For example, like if you're a full member, you can vote for the spokesperson team. That will come up in 2 years from now again. And you become a DESC member if you have LSST data rights, either through the US or Chilean institution, or via an international memorandum of understanding. And if you are on the path to getting data rights, which, as I said, many of you are, you can apply for provisional data, for provisional DESC membership, and that is usually also very, very easy. And in order to become a DESC member, you have to agree to the code of conduct, and you have to obey the LSST DESC publication policy. And I'm handing this off in 1 second. So current activities, and you will hear more about this in the remaining time, are the data previews. You have heard about that already. We are continuing to develop key analysis and processing pipelines using simulated and precursor data. And we collaborate with Rubin, other science collaborations, and groups beyond LSST. So this is my part of the talk. Any questions there? Okay, I think then we will go on to the more exciting part, the computing, and after that, analysis. Jim.
Okay, thanks, Katrin. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick overview of desk computing and just show you what sort of resources are available for you should you become a member and want to look at some data and help out with some of this implementation. So this is just an overview of the resources that we have available to us. Our main computing center is NERSC, the National Energy and Research Scientific Computing Center. And this is run by the DOE. And many projects are hosted there aside from DESC. And so that means it's a shared facility. And as a shared facility, it has lots of user support, but it also means that all the different groups that are sharing it have to have sort of an efficient and robust computing environment in order to use those resources efficiently. And I'll talk about what we set up for running at NERSC in the next few slides. In addition to NERSC, we have 3 secondary computing facilities, one at Argonne, the leadership computing facility there, the computing center at IN2P3 in France, and a computing center in the UK. And these have all played important roles in desk computing, particularly for preparing DC2, and they'll continue to be available during Rubin operations. And in addition, DESC has close connections to the 3 Rubin data facilities. So these are the facilities that the Rubin project will use to do the standard processing of the data from the telescope. And so the main one is the US data facility, which is located at SLAC, which is convenient for DESC because SLAC is also the host lab for DESC. And it's also close by geographically to NERSC, which is up in Berkeley. And there's also the French data facility and the UK data facility, which are also co-located with the 2 facilities that DESC has in France and the UK. And so this is just a diagram showing you how the data flows from the Rubin side into our computing and how we would interact with all the different elements in our particular data centers. So in order to get ready for Rubin operations, there are several computing elements that need to be put in place. And I'll go through each of these in turn in the next few slides, but this is just a quick summary. And I already mentioned the computing environment for DESC users. We also need an image simulation pipeline, and we've demonstrated that with DC2, and I'll talk about that. And we also need our own image processing pipeline because we need specialized analyses to apply to the Rubin data, which go beyond which would come out of the standard processing that the project provides. And then we also need to do data validation to make sure that the data selections we make for the data which we feed to our analysis pipelines, are robust and correct. And then, of course, we also need data access tools in order to work with the data that we have at NERSC and at our other facilities. So on the computing environment side, the goal here is to provide, a standard trackable software environment that we can run at all our different facilities, as well as at, users' laptops and so forth. And so the main challenge there is keeping track of all the different software packages and all the different dependencies and putting that together in such a way that we know which versions will run where, and have that be available for everybody to use in a convenient fashion. So to implement that, what we're using is Conda for package management. And on the right over here is just a screenshot of the YAML definition of one of our standard Python environments. And it just shows all the different packages and their versions. So that's documented in this YAML file. And then we construct a Conda environment, and we use Docker to build images which can be deployed anywhere at the various places where we want to run our code. And so for places like NERSC or the other computing centers, we can use container platforms along with these Docker images in order to run the code on these HPC systems. But these Docker images are also runnable on a user's laptop. And so down here, what I'm showing is just an image of our Docker Hub repository where you can download the latest images of our standard environments. And these 2 links here give links to these 2 images that I'm showing here. And so these environments include all of our standard DESC modules. So we have a core cosmology library, some tools for accessing catalogs and running pipelines, and also more specialized analysis packages, which you may have heard of for computing 2-point functions, cluster finding, supernova light curve classification, and so forth. And those are all bundled together via this Conda environment, along with all the required third-party packages in order for everything to run. So once you have this Docker image, you have the full environment, and everything should just work together smoothly. And so the main goal, one of the main goals for the computing group right now, is developing a coherent management system so that as new versions of these packages are released, we can put together coherent releases and track exactly what's being used when for these various software releases. So I'd like to talk a little bit about DC2. As I mentioned, one of the essential elements for DESC is to have an end-to-end simulation pipeline. And the reason for simulations, of course, is to understand our systematics and also to provide input data which we can use to exercise our analysis pipelines. So for DC2, I'd just like to go quickly over what's in there, and this is exactly the data that will be available either through the data preview 0 that Keith mentioned, or at NERSC in our DC2 repositories. So, and this link here is a link to our DC2 survey paper, which will describe everything I'm going to describe in greater detail. So for static DESC science, the cosmological simulations are producing galaxy catalogs that have realistic galaxy colors, sizes, shapes, and spatial correlations from which you can, in principle, run cosmological analyses and infer the parameters of the cosmology. We've also included objects for time domain probes of dark energy science. So realistics, type 1a supernovae, and AGN light curves, both of which have been lensed and unlensed, which we can use for discovering the cosmography of the universe that we simulated. In order to have realistic observations, we're using simulated survey cadences from the project. And these survey cadences include sort of the wide, fast, deep main survey, as well as deep drilling field observations, and also include information about realistic observing conditions, sky background light, seeing conditions, etc. And we've taken all this information, the catalogs of the objects from these first 2 points and the surveys, and performed image simulations using a detailed model of the atmosphere and the instrument to include all of the effects which will affect the image quality of these images and produce realistic images. And so what I'm showing down here is just an example of what the DC2 data comprise. So this dashed line here is our 300 square degree region. It's being divided up in these individual tracks, which are the units that the that the LSST science pipeline code uses to keep track of where things are in the sky. And these are just successive zoom-ins showing the level, the range of scope of the simulation and the level of detail that you can see at different resolution levels. And so once we have these image simulations, we need to process them using the same LSST science pipelines code, which will be used by the Rubin project itself during operations. And so the outputs of these pipelines are object catalogs, and those object catalogs are going to be used as inputs to DESC's analysis pipelines. And you'll hear more from Renee about our exercises with the DC2 data for those pipelines a bit later. So I'd like to say a little bit about DESC image processing. And the reason why this is important is that we anticipate that most of our computing needs will actually be devoted to redoing some of the image processing on the pixel data that we get from Rubin. And the reason for this is that we need to do this sort of image processing to inform how we evaluate our systematic errors. And so the procedure there would be that we would consider perhaps different data selections for the data that go into, say, the coeditions for those images. We would also maybe consider different algorithms for doing things like measuring shapes or doing deblending to see what the effects of changing those things will be on our systematics. And so because we want to look at the data in all these different ways, we need to have an efficient image processing pipeline that we can run at NERSC and at our other facilities. And so NERSC and our other facilities are a bit different than the typical sort of high throughput computing facilities for which the LSST pipelines were designed. And so we needed to develop our own workflow system in order to use facilities like NERSC efficiently in order to run these pipelines. And so what I'm showing here on the left is just a diagram that's generated by the LSST code, which shows the relationship between all the different data products and all the different various tasks which run in these pipelines. Each of these dark boxes are individual processing tasks, which do things like instrument signature removal, calibration tasks, making coads and measuring objects on those coads. And then all the light boxes are just the various data products which connect these different tasks and feed into each other. As you can see, the processing is actually rather complicated. And so developing a robust and reliable workflow is a challenge. But we've been working closely with the Rubin project on this because they need to do this themselves at the data facilities. And we've been able to develop, using this parcel package, our own version of this pipeline, which runs at NERSC. And we're trying to make sure we can do that efficiently to support the types of processing we need for these systematic error estimates. So once we have the catalogs from Rubin, these object catalogs, as I mentioned, it's necessary to make data selections in order to make them ready for feeding into our analysis pipelines. And to make sure that the data selections we've made are correct, we need a big effort in terms of validating and verifying those selections. And so this involves, in addition to making the selections, implementing tests on them to make sure that they do what we want. And we do want to do that in such a way that we keep track of all the selections and all the results. So provenance is very important. So we need to build up sort of a validation pipeline as well, and set up the infrastructure so that we can make sure that we can do this stuff efficiently. So as sort of a pathfinder for doing this, we are using the DC2 simulations and sort of repurposing the validation work that we did on the initial Galaxy catalogs. And so one of the key tools for that was this DESC platform, which we developed. And so what DESC will do is it'll implement various tests and make comparisons against, precursor surveys or other data to make sure that the simulated data in the Galaxy catalogs are consistent with what we see from other investigations of the universe. So there's a couple different plots here which show some comparisons of our Galaxy catalog, which is Cosmo DC2, against Sloan Digital Sky Survey data. So this plot just shows the 2-point correlation function as a function of separation with consistent data selections made both for the survey data from Sloan and the Cosmo DC2 catalog. Below here, this is just a comparison of what's seen for DES and Sloan for Galaxy clusters. And then overlaid is just what we get out of making the same selections and detections on Cosmo DC2. And so since this is so important for providing the correct inputs for our analysis pipelines, we formed a science release and validation group to coordinate the activities of validation verification across all the different working groups in DESC. And they'll use this infrastructure that we have from DC2 in order to implement the pipelines we need to do this sort of work. And so the final thing I want to talk about is data access. So as we mentioned before, we have DC2 data, and so we've set up this portal which will serve public data, which is associated with our publications. And the DC2 data are available there now. So if you click on this link, you'll be taken to this data portal, and you can, in principle, log in and get access to these data. For access to data at our computing facilities, we probably won't go through an interface like this, but we have set up this GCR catalogs package, which gives us access to the catalogs which are available at NERSC in our repositories. And it provides a standard interface for accessing any kind of catalog data. And so this is what our analysis pipelines use so that they can have a standard interface to access those data in a standard fashion. And the computing group is currently in the process of developing sort of a data management system for tracking all the different data products which are produced by our analysis pipelines. And this is sort of an ongoing effort which we're working on now. Anyway, so that's the quick tour of the stuff for computing. I'll stop there if there are any questions.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
We have a question from Dante. Dante Paz.
Yeah. So what I'm not sure if I understand correctly. So at the moment, you mentioned, Jim, that you are actually trying to validate that the results of the simulation and the catalog that you are producing are going to be similar to what we expect for the LSST data, right? So in that way, the results of this work have the impact in the projection of cosmological parameters and experiments. So we have to, if we want to propose different I don't know, tests or things to do with the cosmology using the DESC data, we have to use these the results of this project. I mean the data products produced by produces in this DESC QA platform. I mean, is where I have to look if I don't know, if I want to propose a new test using voids, for instance, that is my interest, or I'm correct.
Yeah, I mean, I think the idea is that, you know, whatever tests that the various, you know, analyses require, that we would want to incorporate them into sort of our validation framework, right? And so, you know, that's what this DESC QA platform would be. I mean, I think you don't. I mean, to perform the test and to run the test, you don't need to use the platform. I mean, you would have access to the data. But if it's a valuable test for verification that we'd want to run repeatedly in order to make sure that our data selections are coherent and correct, we'd want to integrate it into the standard set of tests that we run.
Okay. Okay. So I think I have to read the documentation. So this is going to be available, the slides and the links, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
So on that note, I should probably just give you a super brief update on some of the science. I'm not going to be able to really cover all of these in detail since we're already a few minutes over. If you wouldn't mind skipping a couple of slides, Jim, that would be great. Great. So these are just some of the science things that we can do, and I'll promise to cover this in 2 minutes so you can all go to your next meeting. But you know, using this DC2 challenge data, we can do science of a various different kinds. So the first is a paper that appeared on the archive recently, which is taking these simulations and saying, can we actually do supernova cosmology directly from the images, obtain fluxes, and then go all the way through to cosmology? And you can see our results on the next slide. And this was a project led by Bruno Sanchez in the DESC. And you can read the archive link there. And this is an example of using our data, the data generated as part of DC2 to actually push through to science results, which is pretty fun. If you go to the next slide, you'll see a different use of our data. So in this case, we have all this DC2 data, and we asked the question, can we understand how to put galaxies into different redshift bins so that we can use them for lensing estimation? Understanding that we only really have the photometry and we have, you know, these calibrations from on the data set. So this was a challenge that started with catalogs that came from DC2, from the Cosmo DC2. And then this was a sort of open challenge within the DESC, and it led to over 20 different methods that were compared in this paper that, again, you can check out on the archive, led by Joe Zuntz in the DESC group. If you go to the next slide, you can see some of the plots of that, which basically shows the winning method of this challenge, but just illustrates that we have, you know, a bunch of really good data that we can cut up multiple ways to ask different questions with the data. If you go to the next slide, you can see some other things that we're doing within the desk, and this is something, you know, we in all of these areas, we're really keen to involve more people, more expertise, because we know that there's lots of different things we can do with the data. One thing that is important as the desk is to try and coordinate some of our efforts so that we know we're going to be really ready for the Rubin data once it comes off, and we can test our pipelines now. So this, the Static Analysis Roundtable, or STAR, is a way to try and bring people together who are working on different static probes, so lensing and clusters, and figure out, are there parts of the pipeline that we need to develop to make sure that we are ready for Rubin data. So if you go to the next slide, you can see this is a very busy diagram, but it shows our whole pipeline with all the different parts that are coming from Rubin and the codes that we have developed within the desk. And this is a fantastic place if there are international collaborators looking for places to add their contributions. This is a great way to get involved and find out, like, which of these pieces can I work on and can I adapt my methods to support the science that's happening, so that we have a lot of pipelines to get to our cosmology at the end. So there's a lot of active work there within the desk. If we go to the next slide, there's also a lot of technical work, so not only science analysis, but also technical work. And I should say that all of these projects do really well at engaging both the computational efforts, the technical work, and the analysis working groups all together in that structure that Katrin showed in the beginning. In this example, our blending working group is trying to understand, can we understand the effects of blending of different sources. And so they developed a code that takes images, again, from DC2 or real images, and then injects transient sources, synthetic sources, and then you can do a comparison, like how can we actually find and detect the how can we test our efficiency of detection of those sources, so that we understand when we get the data, these are objects that we're missing and why. And then in the next slide is our sensor anomalies working group. So in this case, we are using data from an existing telescope, so the HyperSupreme, and we're studying the impact of cosmic ray signals in the sensors. So this is another example of the expertise that is in DESC is also borrowing from other experiments as well as simulations to try and make sure that we've battle tested all of the different parts of our analysis pipeline. So if you go to the next slide, this has been a really whirlwind summary of all the things that we do. And really, this is just a snapshot. I'm really excited to be able to engage with many of you as you start to think about your potential contributions and the things that excite you about the science that we do, the technical work that we do, the computational infrastructure, and the overall science goals of the desk. It's a really vibrant collaboration. We have a lot of people working really hard, and it's also very fun for students and postdocs because they get involved in desk and they have more than just a network in their home institution. They have a group of people who they can talk to, they can engage with on SLAC. We can have lots of telecons to help sort of build the science pipelines that we know we need for the Rubin data. So thanks so much. Sorry, we went a little bit over time, and I'm really excited to start working with a lot of you in the desk.
Thank you for all the speakers. And does anybody have questions?